Now that you've seen all, the way you described your life is you're very narrowly focused on medicine. You're a doctor, a researcher, professor, not especially political. So all of this stuff, you said you were shocked by the low aptitude, the generally unimpressive responses of the people running public health in America at the federal level. You were shocked by the press response to you, and then you were shocked by the country's embrace or acquiescence to unreasonable demands. So you've seen all this stuff that you didn't expect to see. What do you do now? Like, can science sort of begin where we left off in 2019? Or like, what happens now?
I think science and trust in many institutions has been destroyed.
Destroyed.
Okay, destroyed. And we need to address this, and this is the most urgent thing of all. There's two very urgent things to me. The destruction of trust in science, and because as you said, science sort of forms the basis of fact in the world, and also this idea of lack of critical thinking in our young. Because we, the people who did the lockdowns, destroyed a younger generation. I mean, you have to realize there's been a big spike in suicides in teenagers during the lockdown. This is all lockdown, this is not the virus. A massive spike in mental health visits to doctors across the board by teenagers. Tripling of self-harms by teenagers. Medical visits for putting cigarettes out of themselves or slashing their wrists, a tripling since the previous year. 1 out of 4 college students in the United States thought of killing himself during June. This is because of the lockdowns. And I just want to make this point. The lockdowns were not caused by the virus. Human beings decided to do these lockdowns. Okay? The damage from their decision is a moral and an ethical lapse beyond anything that has been ever done in public health. So, science, like you asked me, what is to be done? Okay, we need, and I am involved in this effort that is coming, a relook at science and how we must restore transparency. We must restore the free exchange of ideas in science, because there is no such thing as finding an answer without the free exchange of ideas. And that means free from intimidation, free from censure. And so there are like-minded people like me, and some of them wrote the Great Barrington Declaration, Martin Kulldorff,
Yes.
J. Bhattacharya, Sunetra Gupta, and many, many others. And more are getting courageous enough to come out and say, okay, we need ethics people here. We need, as an example, we have a human subjects committee when you have a clinical study done at an academic medical center.
Right.
Okay, there's supposed to be ethical concerns there. We have human subjects committees approving vaccine trials on infants and young toddlers. Okay, this is a disease that healthy infants and young toddlers have no significant risk from. Okay, no significant, statistically significant risk from. The disease is not highly dangerous to infants and children. That's proven. There's no
how
argument.
could you justify conducting experiments on them?
So how can you justify injecting experimental drugs into infants and children who, by the way, okay, they don't have a possibility of giving informed consent as individuals, obviously, the parents do. And so, there's some questions here about what is going on, to say the least, in the United States of America. Okay, there are real questions about where we are with medical science. So we need to restore free exchange of ideas. That's the first step. It's not that people were necessarily right or wrong. It's that the public doesn't even know the information. When I go and speak to people and cite all the data, they often say to me they've never heard any of this. Why have they never heard any of it? Because it's censored. I did a panel at the invitation of Governor DeSantis of Florida back in January, February of this year on COVID with a press conference. Me, Kulldorff, Bhattacharya, Sunetra Gupta, and Governor DeSantis. Televised with Q&A. YouTube took it down the next day, said it was misinformation. Okay, so Governor DeSantis luckily has no fear, and he called me up and he said, okay, Scott, we're going to do another panel on how YouTube took us down. Because we're not going to stand for that.
Did it remain down?
And it was put back on out of pressure. But we're having overt censorship. My tweet quoting the CDC, quoting the World Health Organization, quoting University of Oxford on masks, when I was advisor to the president, was taken down. Okay, so, I'm not sure what people are afraid of when information is given to the public. The information, once it's out there in the public, is processed, is debated, and then people have an understanding of what's true. And if we don't allow the information to be out there, no one knows what's correct.
Is there any country that has retained the free exchange of information and ideas?
Well, it's sort of interesting. I used to think the U.S. was the freest country in the world.
Because it was.
And it was. And now I think it's very different. There's no more hateful, vicious country about opposing views, in my view, than the United States right now. And this is very frightening to say. But you asked a specific question. In Sweden, a Swedish scientist published a piece on the lack of significant illness or death in children. 1.8 million Swedish children were in schools with no masks, no social distancing, no vaccines, nothing, and with almost no significant illness to speak of. And he published this in the New England Journal. This is a Swedish scientist at, I think, Karolinska Institute. It's a very famous medical center in Sweden. And he was attacked politically on Twitter or on various things. And so Sweden stepped up and they put in laws. The person, the medical scientist, was intimidated and said he's never doing any more research on COVID, which is of course a bad consequence. But the government did say, okay, the society cannot tolerate that kind of action. And I believe that we are really personally, we have lost, at the expense of freedom, we have, the viciousness has taken over in the United States for millions and millions of people. It's sad to say. And I think our country in many ways has lost its humanity. I mean, where are the leaders stepping up and saying, listen, we have to end this. We have to end this hate. You can't despise, destroy, smear everyone who you disagree with. This is not even civilization. And this is really, I think we're at a precipice here of something that we don't even want to contemplate the consequences.
Right. I keep saying last question, but are you staying at Stanford?
I'm staying at Stanford. You have to fight the fight.
That's right.
There are certainly a lot of people that would like me to leave. I may or may not stay in California, but I have no intent to leave Hoover and Stanford. First of all, there's a lot of great people at Hoover. There were several who actually had the courage to actually speak the truth and stand up for me. But even beyond that, I think it's important because if we all evacuate,
that's right.
If we all leave, who's left teaching the children at Stanford?
That's exactly right.
I mean, not to mention people are paying $250,000 to have their children educated at these elite universities. So we really can't back down. And I do want to finish on this point. There was nothing they were going to do to make me back down and stop. And the reason that there was nothing is not just because, I'm that type of person, but, I had thousands of emails from all over, as I mentioned, supporting me, but these were very emotional emails. These were from mothers, fathers, students, priests, scientists, including inside the NIH, begging me to keep talking and never give up. And I remember one day, at the White House, what really brought it home was one Friday, I got an email from someone who had emailed me several times, and I didn't have time to answer emails, but I remembered, I read them. And she said, thank God for you, you're right, and I just want to tell you, my husband just committed suicide because of the lockdown. And then 3 hours later, I get an email from a woman who said, please keep talking, my daughter just tried to kill herself. And, there are people involved here. Okay, this is not an exercise in politics. That was just too much for me, honestly. It was very difficult. But what this kind of stuff that people, these university letters and petitions and comments on Twitter, that's not enough to stop you. You're relied upon by people. And so the answer to would I do it again, which you didn't ask me, is the answer must be yes. Because the truth matters, and people are counting on you to say the truth.
I didn't ask you because it's so obvious what the answer is, and I mean that as a great compliment. You're a brave man, and that was wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Dr. Scott Alice.